Hello survivors and welcome to First Aid Spray, a Resident Evil podcast by fans for fans. This is episode 9 of the show, and in this edition we'll be continuing and concluding our two-part podcast series that focuses on the cover artwork for various Biohazard games in Box Art Study Part 2. My name is Psyniac, you can call me Psy, and joining me on the panel this week, praise the sun, it's Fire Button Steve Valance.
Hello!
Coming second place in the billing this week, like his beloved Liverpool FC, it's Cereal Box 64, Jordan Sugru.
I take offence to that.
Sorry, I could not.
Hello, folks.
And with about as much on-air time as Gotham's version of the Caped Crusader, it's boy wonder Adam Russell Reeves.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
This episode of the podcast is being recorded live in the First Aid Spray Discord server, which you can join now to hear unedited podcasts and contribute to the conversation in the text chat, as well as talk to us and other Resident Evil fans about the series. It's also a good place to put yourself forward for the file readings to appear in the show and to ask questions for our Bitesize Discussion segment. You can find a link to the server in the description of this podcast and on all of our social media accounts. So let's get right into things. It's been a little bit of a while, so let's jump into the news.
Okay, brace yourselves, chaps. This is going to be a long one. So, the Nintendo Switch ports of the Resident Evil Remake 0 and 4 are now available worldwide. What do you think of that, chaps?
I think a few weeks ago, I'm still pretty much in the same mindset of, I'll get them when they're on offer, but not worth my money.
Looking on the notes you provided, it's RE4 is apparently 60 FPS, and it's mostly consistent, and it's not taking advantage of any of the Switch's functionality, like gyro controls and stuff like that. Is that right?
That's what I hear. That's a shame, I think. That's a big, I wouldn't say deal breaker, that's maybe a strong term, but that's a big thing for me, because if I ever replay RE4, it's on the Wii. I love the motion controls personally, so without that, it would feel like a step backwards, definitely, even with the, like you say, mostly consistent 60 FPS.
Oh, I was going to say, I'm just surprised, really. I suppose it's easier to go with the quote-unquote HD version that's been around for, about 5-6 years now, as opposed to trying to redo the Wii version. But they surely still have the hardware. They still have the game there, so...
Yeah. It's a little disappointing.
I think it's definitely disappointing, especially in the case of Resident Evil 4. I think that the Switch obviously has a great sort of pick-up-and-play on the go type functionality, obviously. And I think out of all the games sort of available in that release, Resident Evil 4 really strongly works with like a pick up and go type thing. It's a bit more action orientated. It's segmented out a bit more, obviously. It feels a shame that they didn't really utilize that, because this really would be a fun sort of pick up and go game if they used those Wii controls.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was almost like the last sort of missing piece as far as, the ports are concerned, because Resident Evil 4, it's been done so many times. It's on so many platforms. Really, the only thing that it was missing now was gyro controls. And I feel kind of like nitpicky to kind of say, I'm not quite sure about picking it up on the Switch because it doesn't have gyro controls. But I have literally bought it like 5 or 6 times. I need that. I need that extra sort of incentive. Plus, the pricing is not amazing.
Yeah,
for a digital only release of a game that is 15 years old.
Yeah, I think you've succinctly summed up my points there. Incentive is the good word for it. I know that the Revelations games, I think they went on discount around the time that these new ports came out. I don't know if that's still the case now, but the prices they were, it was like, well, it'd be nice if the new ports were those prices, but never mind. But overall, pretty positive reviews. I did have a quick look at Metacritic, and you're looking at about 70 to 80 between them. Obviously, 0 is the lowest, and that's speaking less about the performance of the port and more about the general reception to that game. But that is what it is, always been the case. The only other major thing of note, and I've heard this from a few people, but a Twitter follower of ours, DKVA1, did say, so shout out to her, that there were some door loading times that were, in her words, god awful, especially in 0, which is kind of a shame. especially like you say for the on-the-go kind of aspect, Adam. Having those longer load times sucks a little bit of the fun out.
With the
That gives you more time to look at the road while you're driving, to be fair.
We do not condone that.
I know we're all criticizing the port, the port for its lack of new functionality, but the ability to play it on the move. I mean, a good round of Mercenaries while playing on the tube, stuff like that. That I can see as a moderate incentive.
Playing I always had a lot of fun just playing the shooting range. I'm one of those weird people that enjoy that, like little bonus game. So
yeah, and I believe since it's the HD version of Zero, I'm guessing it has Wesker mode in there, which that's not something that I would necessarily sit down and play normally. But if I was on the tube or something, sure, why not? So yeah, the value of being able to play it on the go is pretty great. Let's not kid ourselves there.
Maybe that's why they have those big loading times. So if you are playing on the tube, you get time to look around and make sure no one's going to mug you or anything.
That moment where you look up and go, "Is this my stop?" No, we're good. And now, reading the files Serra and the Third Party from Resident Evil 4 in character as Bitores Mendez, Israel Blank Marino, who you can find on Newgrounds at blank 1407.
The whereabouts of Serra are still unknown. Most likely he's using an old secret passage taught to him by his grandfather, who used to hunt in this region long ago. I'm pretty certain that he's hiding our property somewhere in the forest. If his grandfather was still alive, I would have used him to find Serra. But how did he find out about the egg injected into his body? And the fact that he was able to remove it before it hatched is concerning. Another factor that concerns me is that Serra escaped with our property just before the American agent arrived. I don't believe that was just a coincidence. There has to be another player involved in this. In order to settle this whole situation, we have to capture Serra and wait for the effects of the drug to wear off before we inject him with another egg. Once this is done, whoever is behind all of this will surface. Nobody shall interfere with our plans. Those who do shall suffer severe consequences.
Okay, the main subject of this particular episode, as previously stated, is box art part 2. This is following on from our third ever episode where we sat down and talked about all the classic games box art, and it kind of our plan was to talk about every game in the series, but it kind of got away from us, so we finished Outbreak File 2 and put a pin in it, and now we're going to continue from there. So if you haven't listened to episode 3, now might be a good time to go back and listen to it. We talk about all the different regional differences between the box art from Resident Evil, the original game, right up to the sort of turn where everything changes with Resident Evil 4, so it's kind of an appropriate place to pause. The IMGA link for all these files is in the description of this podcast, so click that and scroll all the way down to Biohazard 4, and you can sort of see what we're talking about as we go through it as well. If the link isn't working, depending on what app or whatever you're using, then you can go to soundcloud.com/first-aid-spray-podcast and find the podcast episode. The link in there will definitely work. All of that out of the way, let's start with Biohazard 4. And since Adam, you're new to the box art study show, I'm going to start with you. What do you think about the Resident Evil 4 covers overall? We'll stick to the GameCube ones for now, I think, and we'll handle each release as it goes over.
Just in general?
Yeah, what do you think? What's the better and what's the worst ones? What do you think?
The more minimalist ones I really like, the woods ones, as it were. I actually love those covers. The rest, I think, are somewhat of an exercise in mediocrity. I think it was that era of games when we started to get a lot of maybe dull covers, not just Resident Evil. Some are good, some are boring. Overall, I think they're fine. As we go through them, there's a few issues I have, which I'll point out. But I don't mind them. The ones that are near and dear to me are the ones that I think are the best anyway, so it works for me.
Yeah, I always have to worry about that. It's like, is there nostalgia involved with why I like the European ones? I think into the terms of Resident Evil 4, for me, I just like the consistency of the European ones, and we talked about this on the previous box art episode we did, where we talked about the remake on GameCube and Zero being insanely minimalist. It's literally just the title and some kind of background that's very vague, really. And Resident Evil 4 is similar along that. The title's right in the middle, and there's just a really simple image. I don't necessarily think the sort of chainsaw guy standing in wood really reflects the game that well. I know it was part of the marketing, Dr. Salvador, but as a cover, I really like it. The other ones are a bit more following along the lines of just slapping stuff together, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, this is like from the era when graphics are just starting to make people look a bit more like people, and they're trying to show it off, or at least that's the way it seems to me. I think overall, if I had to pick one, it would probably be the European one, because although it only really reflects the first, like you said, so it reflects like what the early stages of the game, mostly, if anything. And it's obviously got crows on it, as we've established in the previous podcast. Big deal. I kind of, in middle ground, I can't really say anything of the Japanese one other than it looks very bland. It's just got like Leon being all like, look at my bicep and my gun and my scowly face. But the American one, I kind of like it for the horde aspect, because it's trying to show that you are outnumbered. There is a maniac with a chainsaw leading the pack against you.
That's true.
Yeah, as a reflective of the actual game itself, I think it's a bit better, but I do prefer the European one for that kind of aesthetic. And on a new scale I came up with just before today, which is the would I wear it on a T-shirt scale. I'm still going with the European one, sadly.
That's a great scale. I love that.
On a scale of T-shirt to no, it's still Europe. But NTSC's close second. Japan's in third. Like, if there could be a fourth, it would be that.
It's weird, like, it's what you pointed out about the American one and Japanese ones. Looking at them now and scrolling down a little bit to the other ports and stuff, it's a kind of an ongoing theme, because the Japanese versions of Biohazard 4 generally don't have any enemies on them at all. It's just Leon standing there with a gun. And then in some instances, the American versions have inserted some enemies. So the PS2 version, you've got Mendez there looming in the background. And then the Wii version as well, it's almost like the same cover, but sort of from a different perspective. And they've literally just shown that he's surrounded by other characters and Ganados and stuff. And I hadn't even realized that before, that they're similar. But the Japanese version, has pulled away from having monsters on the cover and focuses just on the characters, especially in the case of the PS2 one, where it's literally, Leon, Ada, Ashley, here they are. Boom.
Is Leon the most sort of like anime-ish of the main kind of protagonists? What with his kind of, his cool hair and his scowl. In every one of these covers, it's like he's got a different kind of pose. The one particular that stands out is the PS2 NTSC version, where, I mean, so many of these have him facing away from the enemies, but aiming at something. But we're not to believe that he's necessarily surrounded. It's just more of a stylistic choice. But he looks so smug, so self-satisfied, as he is pointing away from Mendez, who's behind him, who clearly would be his biggest threat in that crowd. And he just looks so confident and cocky. I don't know. There's a mixture of displays going on in these covers, because it really does feel like they're kind of marketing to all kinds of different eyes. People in stores and stuff like that.
Isn't PS2's NTSC Shinkiro artwork? I mean, it looks like it's more hand drawn than the others. Am I going crazy?
I believe it's a render, but that's a good shout. It feels a bit Shinkiro, and you're appealing to a player who does love Shinkiro artwork.
The Wii edition also looks pretty more stylized, hand drawn to me than the Japan Wii edition. I like that Leon a little bit more than most of the others.
Well, I don't know. I'm still fond of the European Wii edition. I'm biased, obviously, but again, it's on the T-shirt scale. I love that look. That's
I love that all of the Woods covers are almost sequential based on kind of like how they kind of came out. So you had the PAL edition on the GameCube, and it's very dense. Like you're just getting a little silhouette of Dr. Salvador in the back, and it's all a wooded area. And then the PS2 edition, not as many trees, and he's a little bit closer. In the Wii edition, there's even fewer trees, and he's really close. Like,
well, he does have a
if they had-
chainsaw. I mean, he's been working for years on those trees. He's just very misunderstood.
if they
All
never
about head cuts.
If they'd ever made like a physical edition for the Switch, it would literally just be Dr. Salvador's eyes. Maybe a bit of bark just hanging off the sack that he's got on his head.
There's some serious deforestation going through from the original GameCube one to the most recent wooded one.
I remember at the time there was sort of, online people were debating about the box arts, whether the GameCube or the PS2 version of the PAL cover was better. I love both because they kind of got the red and black aesthetic. It's really nice. I'm inclined to say that I like the PS2 version more because you can see Dr. Salvador a bit better, and I don't know, it just looks a little bit more threatening, despite there being fewer trees. I don't know. I like that one. Out of all of them, I like that one the best.
I think I agree with you there. Actually, something about that bold red color. I'm a fan of the PS2 version in particular.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, I really love the GameCube one, the PAL one, because I had that one and it was awesome. I don't know why I'm thinking it. I might be completely wrong, but I feel like it was reversible.
I'm not sure. Yeah.
Again, I could be super wrong, but for some reason I'm triggering a memory in my head that had a reversible cover. But I don't know.
So it got a steel case release. I don't know if that's on this list of Imgus.
It's not. That's something that I forgot. Yeah.
You idiot.
Oh dear. Well, looks like I'll have to resign.
Yeah, it was a what was it? Kind of like sort of stained gold with like some blood stains on it, and I think it was already meant to have some sort of aesthetic damage. Or
yes.
Maybe that was just a bad second-hand edition I picked up.
No, it does. I've got it in my hands now. That's why I was saying it.
Looking back on these covers, it definitely reminds me of just how prolific in the marketing Dr. Salvador was. Because I think it wouldn't really be sort of believed now if you're only just playing the game now. But he was like a massive part of the marketing.
Oh, yeah.
It was always.
I mean,
to be fair, he's a pretty big. I mean, you face him multiple times throughout the game, probably more than any other boss type enemy. Really, he comes back a fair amount.
Yeah.
He even got his own controller.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, he did. The chainsaw controller. Oh, that was a terror.
So
I've got my PS2 on somewhere.
Let's scoot down to Umbrella Chronicles, and
I got a couple of quick observations that I just made, if that's cool with you guys.
Sure, go for it.
So Resident Evil 4 Japan GameCube. Why does Leon have like a camera on his crotch?
That's
really what
flashlight.
it looks like.
That's his flashlight when he's in the cage.
Okay. I thought he was taking weird like crotch shots of like Yanados or something. and then my other stupid observation, which really annoyed me just for the cropping, was Resident Evil 4 Wii Japan Edition. There's just a Gyarados arm. Like, there's no enemies in the background, and then there's a arm. Just one arm. Here you go.
What's that about?
No, I can't see it.
That is so bad. You can clearly tell. You can clearly tell that they've cropped it from. You can clearly tell that they've cropped it from like the NTSC version, because on the NTSC version the arm is there, obviously. But it is literally just an arm.
Yeah, exactly. The NTSC you see kind of the whole picture, as it were. And the other thing that really is kind of different to Resident Evil 4 compared to the previous main numbered editions is they all have the number after, and entirely across this whole series of covers, no matter what it's on, it's 4 Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Mhm.
How have I spent 15 years not noticing this stuff? Did my lateral mind just put the 4 on the end anyway? That's weird. I never
We've been
noticed
saying
that.
it wrong for years, Jordan. It's for
Yeah.
Resident Evil. It's for Biohazard.
If the announcer
Exactly.
said that on the start screen, you wouldn't take it as seriously, would you?
For
Yeah.
Resident Evil. No, I don't think I would.
So Umbrella Chronicles is with probably far less to say about it. It is interesting to say that the Japanese version again continues the trend of characters and not much in the way of enemies. Wesker like looming over since he's the sort of like through line of Umbrella Chronicles, and some renders of everyone there at the front. This is a deep reference, but Chris Redfield kind of looking like Chip Hazard from Small Soldiers, with the crew cut going on there. Yeah, that one's okay. The American version's very simple, blood-stained umbrella logo, and it's kind of nice, but it doesn't really do a lot for you. And then the European version is that just moved around a bit with some zombies plonked at the bottom. Any particular observations on this one, Steve?
For the first time, Carlos is on a cover.
That's true. Yeah.
You know,
And last, right?
Yeah.
I think this is his last appearance on a cover as well. But, you know, credit where it's due. I actually kind of like the Japanese one for the whole, like, Wesker looming over them, glowing red eye. Kind of looks very sinister. Unfortunately, it's just then got the Power Rangers beneath him, and it kind of mellows out a bit. You know, it's like, I don't know. There's nostalgia here, but I kind of still have a feeling that the PAL version is cool as well, although that's probably due to the actually really angular zombie faces at the bottom.
Yeah,
and the bright glowing white eyes. On the T-shirt scale, I'm gonna have to go with probably. I'm torn. I'm gonna have to go with the PAL version. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that's. Still
I think I agree with that on the T-shirt scale. I think that's a good choice.
Yeah.
If you had the Japanese cover on a T-shirt, people would be like, "What band is that?" No Ganado arms whatsoever on any of these covers. I'm very disappointed.
Very annoying.
Yeah. Japanese covers are absolutely fixated with character renders to an obnoxious degree. I actually don't really like the renders of the main characters on the Japanese cover. I mean, Wesker looks all right, but
yeah,
considering we know sort of, I absolutely love how Chris and Jill look in remake. I don't know what it is about the particular character models in that, but I thought it looked really good and kind of a bit creepy as well. Like it looked quite gaunt in that. They just kind of look a bit sort of generic in this. It's fine, but like it definitely kind of feels descriptive of the sort of the Wii game in that it was just sort of like a general kind of cover song of all of the adventures up to that point. Adventures is probably not the right word, but I really like the PAL cover. I actually remember at the time I saw it getting promoted a lot in the magazines, and I don't know if it was official art, but I remember in the same vein as like the bottom half of the cover, there was a promotional image of a zombie hand coming out of the ground holding a Wii remote. Because it has to. It has to. It's like, we got a Resident Evil game on the Wii. Got to give a zombie hand. Got to give a Ganado arm a Wii remote.
Indeed, I remember that. Yeah. So go on, Adam.
Sorry, I got a couple issues with this Japan.
Oh, there we go.
Cover. Here we go. So as you know, guys, I'm a bit more into my art and stuff. I'm very drawn to aesthetics. So I have very big issues with the perspectives in this one. The characters at the front clearly should be bigger than the characters behind them. That's how perspective works. Carlos's hand is the size of Jill's entire head. That's a problem for me. And the second problem is Billy's right arm would have to be in such a weird... unless it's Rebecca holding the shotgun.
If
it was Billy, his arm is like His arm would have to be so close to his like chin and chest. It's just horrible. And Chris's haircut is stupid. He looks dumb.
I just kind of like that Carlos is pensive. Jill and Rebecca both look worried. Chris looks angry, and then Billy's just like, "How are we?"
Also, why the hell does Wesker wear sunglasses when he's constantly looking over the top of them?
I didn't realize we were going to bury this cover so much, but Chris's render definitely looks like he's from SmackDown vs. Raw 2008.
He looks like his name would be like Ron Cena, some kind of discount John
Ron
Cena.
Oh.
Yep, that's right. The Marine. So, since in this kind of era, moving onwards, at least after this point, we're going to get less variation between different regions. We thought we'd bulk out this podcast a little bit with the CGI movies. So the next one on the docket is the first CGI movie, which is Degeneration. So these are a bit weird because we've got here the Japanese one, again, focusing just on characters, nothing else, just some stuff in the background that's related to the airport, I guess, but it just makes me think of like Star Wars for some reason. It does something about it. And then the NTSC version, which is also the PAL version, but I found another version here that's been used in Europe in some parts of Europe, so I put that in as well. They're all just kind of a mess, to be honest. Or I guess the Japanese one's fine, but the rest just a kind of a mess of colours and just loads of stuff going on. And look at the NTSC version. You've got zombies in the corner. You've got the two characters. There's a plane at the bottom right. It's like they really couldn't focus on what element they wanted to really put forward, I think.
I think what they wanted to do with that is like, if you don't want to watch the film, here's the cover and this is what it is.
Here's the film, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same with the other one as well, where at the bottom there you've got more extra stuff going on with a tyrant from, which is kind of a spoiler, I guess. Yeah.
They kind of
Did
feel
the
like
Americans really need it to say an original CG motion picture in case they got confused over everyone else?
they look like fan art.
Mm.
And, you know, like, it's all that kind of art you get on book covers for like tie-ins of licensed stuff. It's I'm uninspired by them all. They're all like they're either a collage or they're just dull. Like the Japanese one's probably the least offensive because it's just like Claire and Leon, but they look. I mean, Leon looks like he's 10 years old and Claire's shooting off camera. It's just 0 t-shirts out of 3. I agree. I can't. Yeah.
Also, Leon is 200% anime in this round. He's getting there. To give some defense to the NTSC cover, it at least sticks to the whole idea of the colors, sort of like the orange versus blue sort of complementary colors, kind of in stark difference. But yeah, it's really messy. A commercial jet has almost as much space on the cover as the zombies, which is kind of crazy.
The problem with that one as well is the way they've done the color bleed is there's the blue zombies, but then the far right zombies kind of hit by the color bleed, so he's actually like normal colored.
Yeah,
so that's kind of weird. Like his face just pops out really obviously against the rest of them. Like, hey, I'm not frozen.
So let's move on, I think, to Biohazard 5. I'm actually quite a big fan of the Japanese cover, personally. Seems eye-catching. It's a bit different. Not quite as drab as the rest, which is fine, I guess, for a horror franchise. But with Resident Evil 5 kind of focusing more on daytime stuff, I really like that. The characters being back-to-back is also like a nice little nod to the fact that the game's gone co-op for the first time. And that's the American one. And again, also worth noting that the European cover continues the trend from the GameCube, continuing on to the PS3 and the Xbox, with just having the title in the middle and some very minimalist stuff behind it. Obviously, the kind of outline of Africa with Kujuju scratched everywhere. Yeah, these are all pretty good, actually. What do you reckon of these, Jordan?
It's exactly what Africa looks like, by the way. It's had Kijiji written all over it. It was a meticulous project done in the 1930s.
Good old Banksy.
It's actually protected by perspex all over, so you can't damage it. I'll say from the outset that I prefer the European cover wholeheartedly. I think it's the cleanest in my opinion, and also at the time, it's not so much the case now. But after Resident Evil 4, there was definitely a push to, I suppose going from Resident Evil 4 to Resident Evil 6, there was a push to make the series kind of a bit more globe-trotting. It's like,
sure.
You know, we're out of Raccoon City, and now we're going to Spain, and now we're going to Africa, and then in 6, it was just kind of like we're going everywhere. And I think that compelled me a lot at the time. I mean, I remember the first teaser trailer came out for Resident Evil 5. A lot of people thought that maybe it was going to take place in Brazil. And then obviously it turned out that it was going to be taking place in Africa. And I just thought that was really kind of, you know, compelling that it was going across the world and stuff like that. So if I had those 3 covers sort of in front of me in the store, that's the one that would interest me the most because, well, it's so on the nose about where it's going that you're like, oh, you know, I'm going to see a brand new place. So I like that one in particular. But yeah, it's a fair point about, you know, establishing the fact that this is the first co-op game, you know, in the main series, and to make a big deal of it. NTSC is just a bit of a compromise, isn't it? It's just sort of
it looks like a halfway house, doesn't it?
Yeah,
between both of them. Between
if you scroll through them, the NTS the POW one just creeps up the screen till it's taken over.
Yeah.
Or the 2 characters are just descending into Africa. It's actually the ending of Terminator 2.
That's correct, exactly. I like the fact that we just got through 4 Resident Evil, and we finally get to a place where we're at Resident 5 and Evil.
You actually have to ask somebody else to say 5 as you're saying Resident Evil. Yeah.
As you get to the E, they have to shout 5.
Yeah, that's the only correct way to say it. They have to bring in a second announcer for the start screen.
Oh man.
I kind of like all 3 of these. Is that bad? I don't know. I can't pick an overall. I suppose on a t-shirt aesthetic, it's PAL, but I kind of like the way all the, like, you know, Sheva and Chris are posed on the Japanese and the NTSC ones. Part of me appreciates the fact that we also see, like Si said earlier, the daytime aspect of the Japanese one, and I suppose posture-wise, this is getting really pretentious now, but the posture between the Japanese one and the NTSC one, it's like Chris and Sheva are almost on equal footing, as opposed to Chris being in the forefront and Sheva being in the background. Does that make any sense? I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you mean. She does look more like support rather than equal.
Yeah, and I can't prefer it when she's like an evil footing. I mean, to be fair, she's got the badass shotgun, he's got the pea shooter. But
yeah, but his bicep is the size of her like chest area.
Yeah, fair.
God bless Chris and his flipping steroid problems.
Well,
I have to point out, obviously, if you play the single player, are you giving Sheva a shotgun?
It's a waste to not give her a rifle, isn't it? Because
you want to kind of keep that to yourself, you know, like sort of, you know, I don't know, she can keep some of the ammo and stuff like that, but she's not gonna have any first aid sprays or anything.
Yeah,
thankfully, when I played it through on co-op, and I haven't ever played the single player.
Yeah. It's a thing.
Evil 5 single player is just like the AI just likes to spend everything.
Mm-hmm.
You got to give it an allowance.
Speaking of Sheva, let's move slightly down to Gold Edition, where she's been replaced by Jill, obviously because Gold Edition has the DLC for Resident Evil 5, one of those being Lost in Nightmares, which is about Chris and Jill. So in order to demonstrate that, she's been put on the cover instead. Interestingly, as we were just talking about posture somewhat, she is much more front and center. Yeah, Yeah, it's okay. It's, I'm not really. When you compare the two, her sort of like, I don't know, something about her pose in the NTSC and PAL version and her general body size seems to like change. She seems much more slimmer, which is a bit odd. But they're both fine. I guess the NTSC and PAL version is preferable because it's more kind of in line with the sort of scratchy stuff going on, and it does have a nice color scheme to it with that gold and red overlay. But yeah, they're fine.
I'm saying the stance is 200% anime, though, isn't it?
It's very anime.
For sure.
Yeah.
Good colouring on both. Good sort of mood on both. But yeah, they're nothing special.
If you have a look at the Japanese edition, just underneath the title, it seems like Jill's body kind of continues down.
Oh,
she looks like she's fallen.
that is really weird.
She
It
is
looks
kind
like
of
her waist is twisted all the way around to me.
Yeah.
It looks weird.
yeah. She's like, dodge this, and she just starts falling backwards. I mean, out of the two of them, I would definitely say that the alternative edition, as it's called in Japan, is the preferable cover. I think it's just got a bit of a nicer feel to it. Something about the gold edition feels like it takes, it sucks a little bit of the intrigue out of a Resident Evil cover. It makes it so sort of standard, and the whole essence with a really good Resident Evil cover is that it kind of really compels you. It gets your mind working as to, what you're going to find in this game, like what kind of horrors are there within. And this one just kind of it's just two people with guns, gets the gold background, and it's just obviously just pushing the fact that it's got all this content. So nothing particularly exciting about that, in my opinion.
That's fair enough. So, we talked about Umbrella Chronicles. Let's talk about its sequel. That's next, Biohazard: The Dark Side Chronicles. This is the one that Colin on the server wanted us to talk about the most. He thought it was interesting that the NTSC and PAL versions were so different. It's because, and this I believe happened in the past, the PAL version is closest to the Japanese version. The Japanese version, let's be honest, is a mess of just stuff. There's renders everywhere. There's stuff going on in the background. There's like bullet holes. It's just insane. The PAL version, it spaces it out, but it's almost too sparse in a weird way. Like, one six of one and half a dozen of the other. But yeah, the American version is completely different. How do we feel about Dark Side Chronicles? Adam, let's start with you.
Yeah, it is a mess. The Japanese one being the worst offender just because of the amount of extra kind of background stuff they've crammed in. I kind of like the bullet holes in glass. I feel like they were going for like a light gun type thing. Like you're shooting at a screen, so like
it makes sense.
A screen is glass, whatever. It's nice. It's a little odd. Is this one? I mean, I'm not super familiar with Dark Side Chronicles and the cast of characters, but it just seems to be a little mishmash. We've got like the weird like zombie at the top, and then the one everyone loves hates Steve. The good thing about that is that zombie cop is 100% about to grab Steve and kill him, so that works. I don't know who bottom right is supposed to be.
That's Krauser.
Oh, that's Krauser? Okay. That's cool. It's a bit weird to have him on there because he's really such a small part of the lore, really, when you actually...
So Dark Side Chronicles, for those people that haven't played it, it's a retelling, much in the same way that Umbrella Chronicles told stories previously. It retells 2 and Code Veronica, but it also has its own story in between that, and it's a prequel to 4, and tells of a story that involves Leon and Krauser as the main characters, and kind of explains upon their history together. So in a way, it makes sense for them to both be on the cover, because that's the interweaving plot.
That's fair then. It just still snaps as kind of weird to me, because I'm like, I don't really get it. The NTSC one is fine. I like the lighting on it. It still suffers from the problem of like, dude has gun, chick looks on, like in more of a protective butt to the camera stance. We get that a lot. But I mean, I guess, it's however many years old now. And then the PAL version is a bit cleaner than the Japanese version, but there's some odd choices here. Like, part of the glass is shattered where the zombie's mouth is on the right hand side. So just the zombie's mouth, inside of its mouth, is like in more high definition to the rest of its face, which instantly draws my eye the second I look at it and kind of ruins the cover for me.
Yeah, because of the glass, the coloration is a bit all over the place in different bits and bobs. It's really interesting because when you look at compare the Japanese and the PAL version, sort of that zombie that you were talking about that was in the top left, for some reason has been moved down to the center, and there's another zombie in its place in the top left.
There's another.
They've taken out all the extra characters and just put another zombie in. It's just a interesting, why they did that. But there you go.
The zombie cop's got a very good agent.
Want to be closest to the center, please.
The PAL edition. It's very clean, as you say, but there are a couple of things which I noticed. One, in both the Japanese and the European edition, Claire has a strange stare to her. Like, I don't like the way she's looking at the camera. It's so weird. You almost see entirely the whites of her eyes. But also, I don't know if this happens much with these games, but where there's zombies and protagonists on at the same time, but the zombies get more space on the cover, if not, the predominant space on the cover compared to the main characters. There's 3 of them. And they've all got their mouths open like they're singing. That's all I can take from it, is like that they are trying to be the 3 tenors of zombies. But it's weird because they're all very similar poses. I don't know. It feels weird, but yes, somebody might be fooled into thinking that somebody shot their cover of Resident Evil: The Dark Side Chronicles, and it's like, oh no, that will affect the resale value.
I'm kind of torn on these 3. Looking at them, I've been a bit unfair to most of the NTSC covers throughout this entire thing, and I kind of feel like I prefer that one the most. I feel like that's the one that's more Resident Evil than the others, because it's got monsters and characters, and there's kind of a horror theme to it, as opposed to just, here's a white background and some random objects and bullet holes.
Yeah, that's
Is that
fair
bad?
enough.
I don't know.
I think I side with you there. That one seems the most, the easiest to latch onto in a way. It just makes more sense.
Yeah, definitely.
I would definitely get that as the t-shirt out of the 3.
Yeah, I'd say so. That takes the t-shirt.
on it.
Right, so let's move on to the 3DS. Biohazard the Mercenaries. I apologise if you're looking at the Imgur link. I couldn't really find anything of higher quality than what we've got. So it's a tiny little image of Krauser, Claire, Chris, Hunk, just kind of doing stuff. It's not really clear. Maybe it'd be helpful if it was a bigger image. But again, I just feels like more focus on characters and kind of just a slapdash sort of thing.
Are there any enemies present at all?
I can't see anything, to be honest. It doesn't really look like it.
Enhance.
Oh, I'm trying. And the NTSC and PAL versions, similar. Chris pointing his gun at an enemy, and it's funny because the 3DS version being much more muted colours, it takes out the background, it's all very just white, black and red. Just kind of makes me think of the PAL version of Resi 4 for the Wii, where they turned the red, black and white. I wonder if that was an intentional little nod or not.
The reason, I was working when the 3DS came out, I was working as an assistant manager for Game at that point. And we actually got a document on all of the covers. They actually made a pretty big deal of it. If you remember, they did the white background on a lot of release covers. This was actually one of the release games. They did it with like the Pilot Wings. There were a bunch of versions that just had like a white cover with some art, and then red was like the main color of titles and stuff.
Right, okay.
And it goes with the banner on the side, which is the black, red, and white of the 3DS. And I can't remember what it was, but it was something to do with the brain and those colors and 3D perspectives.
Right,
It doesn't
Oh.
carry across, in my opinion. But yeah, I remember reading that document saying, "Hey, we're doing all of these colors, and this is going to be like a launch thing."
Well, there you go. Some exclusive information almost. Just learned something.
Yeah,
Fair enough. I think it's the best one of the three, to be honest. I think
I agree.
it's very
It's
striking.
more concise.
Yeah, true.
It's very
Yeah.
aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, I imagine Jordan. How do you feel? Are you in agreement?
I like the NTSC a little bit more.
Ooh.
I don't know exactly why, because it is a bit more messy. But I think I suppose I like those colors because I just sort of associate them with the Resident Evil 5 cover, and obviously this is a homage to
Yeah.
the excursions in that. Anyway, I'm just so glad to see another Resident Evil cover where the protagonist is actually facing the enemy and he's actually fighting the enemy.
For once.
Yeah, that's really frustrating. I know they can't do it all the time, but I like that in particular. I've never seen the Japanese cover before, and this, Chris, Claire, Krauser, Honk just seems like my new favorite Left 4 Dead team.
It definitely makes
Probably
sense.
a mod out there.
It definitely makes sense in terms of the idea of the mercenaries. It conveys that pretty well. I would love to see this artwork in its original form. I think it would be interesting, but yeah, it's a bit dudes and nothing happening, which is sort of the opposite of most of.
I mean, but the other two could really be stylized screenshots from Resi 5. I mean, they're great, but they could just
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very fair.
Right.
Dudes and Nothing Happening needs to be a collection. I want to get a bunch of box arts of just dudes and nothing happening.
And now, reading the filed transcript from Resident Evil Revelations, Brendan Mason, who you can find on Twitter at bmasonva.
Dearest friend, I am at my wit's end. I am sorry, but I must go on ahead. They are sleeping, but they will wake up eventually. Now's my chance. Just thinking about them makes my hair stand on end. Their ugly bodies are not of this world. Their stench, like rotting organs, and their screams, like echoes from hell itself. I'm so frightened that I can't stop shaking even now as I write this. Be careful. The bloated blisters on the walls are their eggs. They can regenerate from them. Please don't think that I've abandoned you. I did it for my family. I will pray for your safety.
So sticking with the 3DS, going to move on to Biohazard Revelations. This one's interesting to me because this is the first game that we've talked about in the entire series where it's consistent completely across the board. Every region that I know of had the same box art or near enough the same box art of the floating eyeball through the sort of porthole thing. Also interesting to note, nice coincidence, that this is the first time Resident Evil had Japanese voice acting. So the more some things change, the more other things stay the same, I suppose. Yeah, I guess we might as well discuss the unveiled edition or the HD port as well. They all follow the theme of the porthole. And they're all pretty good. I'm not as keen on the Japanese version. Again, with the character being front and center, it's fine, but there's something more spooky and, classically horror about the weird floating eyeball or the hand on the glass, the blood-stained hand. That one in particular is pretty cool. How do we feel about these? One. Yeah, is that the best one?
Yeah, I think we would probably agree that the hand. I mean, it feels a lot more Resident Evil in my mind than kind of what we've just gone. It feels like it's going back to a more creepy type thing. It evokes a lot for me, the hand and the eye as well. I like. again, the Japanese one, I'm not super mad about.
Yeah, of course, the eye is meant to be the throwback because the eyes being on covers and title screens is meant to be sort of a nod to the past. But yeah, there's something about the hand that's very cool.
I'm going to say the Western Revelations cover, the Unveiled edition, is definitely the standout for me. I jokes aside, yes, this is the T-shirt one, yes, okay, but it's got atmosphere, whereas the other ones feel like I know the others just seem like ooh, we're spooky and underwater. Whereas that one is kind of almost there's that little bit of drama to it, and it's less. I think it's saturated. The term is like it's less saturated than the other two. So I kind of it feels more artistic and. Dare I say it, it's almost from a different horror franchise in terms of just how scary the cover looks.
Yeah, it could be a movie poster or something, really, couldn't it?
Yeah.
Jordan, how do you feel?
How do I feel? Well, I do have to say that I think they are all trying their very hardest to both be and not be Condemned 2. Because I mean, as soon as the cover was first revealed, I saw the 3DS cover, and I thought that's like Condemned 2, right down to the eye. Of course, I think it probably makes more sense on the Resident Evil cover to have a massive eye looking through a window. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree that the PS3 edition, the NTSC and PAL cover it's definitely more tasteful. But I mean, I would pick any of these over that horrible Resident Evil Gaiden one.
I still like the Gaiden one. I would have stand up for show in here, and I'd say that the Gaiden one's still a good cover.
What they were trying to do with Resident Evil Gaiden's cover is what they've actually achieved with Resident Evil Revelations.
That's a nicer way of putting it, I think.
Yeah.
I'm on about the life preserver ring, not the one where it's just like 1.5 like Leon.
Oh yeah,
Deviant Art Leon.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are also the covers where some of them had the famous spelling errors. Like
Yes,
there was an extra I in Revelations, and there was Capcom or something like that.
Yes, that's right.
I was so sad that when I got my edition of Revelations, I was disappointed that it didn't have a spelling error on it.
I checked as well.
Serious?
Yeah. I checked to make sure mine was to see if it was the special one. Yeah, all right, okay. Well, speaking of special, scrolling on down, Operation Raccoon City now.
To say about these.
This one is interesting. So let's have a look. Japan, you've got a very similar cover to the NTSC and PAL. Suddenly there's an edition of a zombie. Again, Japan, shying away from monsters again. Must be something going on there with censorship or something. Some of the kind of... I don't know if it's maybe just the lighting, but it looks like the characters are positioned slightly different, but it might just be the way that the lighting is. And then underneath that, we've got the special edition as well, which was released in the US, which is, it's different, but it's not particularly interesting. What do we think of the weirdly slight differences between the Japanese and Western releases? Steve?
I can actually appreciate, let's not get into the specifics of Operation Raccoon City itself as a game. But the aesthetic of the Japanese version, with its like darker light levels and higher saturation, I kind of appreciate. And I think on the T-shirt scale, that's the winner. But it's also the characters are a little bit more sinister. They're fully like lit up on the Western covers, whereas they are kind of that little bit more dark, and it makes them seem evil themselves, which, as they are narratively, they're the bad guys. They're Umbrella. So I kind of feel like it works more. They just look like Spec Ops guys with neon lights on the Western cover. As for like the special edition, reminds me of Umbrella Chronicles. I'm pretty sure we're all understanding what I'm saying there. Also feels like could be the direct novelization kind of, because of the way it's just a collage of characters.
Yeah.
Vector is apparently really important for some reason, and the Tyrant is also clearly integral to the plot. But
I was thinking
the three,
Sorry, go on.
No, I'm going to say of the three, it's definitely the Japanese one for me.
I was thinking Operation Raccoon City. That special edition cover, I was thinking Operation Raccoon City, the Netflix series.
Yeah, that's what it looks like for sure.
Yeah, I think there's some very good points there, Steve, about like the Japanese cover in particular, because of the contrast and the light and stuff like that. It works better for the image that they're trying to portray. There's more clarity on the NTSC and PAL version, but yeah, I do like that one. Also, Tyrant looks much better. I would say in the Japanese version, you can see more of him in the PAL and NTSC version, but he kind of looks like he's on a catwalk. It kind of looks like he's strutting. The other one, he kind of, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think his pose is a little bit different on the Japanese one, and he looks a little bit more imposing, like he's actually kind of like charging towards the protagonists in quotations. But yeah, the NTSC and PAL, he looks a little bit less scary to me.
So the USA Special Edition is like the mastermind behind it all, the way it's framed.
That is very true. Yeah.
Who would have thought Mr. X had a master
my
plan?
problem with it. It's like, wait, what? Like, they chose that on every single cover to be like, here's the big bad guy, and that really wasn't the case in the game. I mean, the game was muddy enough that there wasn't really a big bad. It didn't kind of work that way.
I have a wild theory about this, that they wanted to put something iconic on there, and perhaps Nemesis, and someone at Capcom shut it down, and they were like, well, this is the next best thing. I've got no basis to go on that, but I think that's probably what happened.
Well, they couldn't have put Nemesis in the first place, because at the time it was there was mild controversy, wasn't there? Because it was going to be an Xbox exclusive, that Nemesis mode. And you can't put him on the European box art or whatever if it's only going to be on the PS3 or the Xbox.
I think you're probably on the money side, because, like, especially at this point before the remake, obviously, this guy was somewhat of an obscure character, really. Yeah. No one really talked about this Tyrant, and it was a case of having to get kind of all the way through a game and into a second part of a game, as it were, to kind of get to him. A lot of people did do that, obviously, but there's probably a lot of people that also didn't do that.
Yeah, sure.
For me, at this point, I wasn't like, whoa, finally. So I hate on the NTSC and PAL cover that the zombie is like, he looks so aware that he's being used as a human shield. Like, oh no! I hate it so much. It makes me angry. But what I love is, like, the Japanese cover, we get like the whole front and back. And I don't know if this was written on the back, but just having all roads lead to hell in English on a Japanese cover is so metal.
That's really hell with it. The back covers the T-shirt then. Yeah. That one
probably
bit.
A giant amount of Japanese game players that couldn't read that.
T-shirt idea. Like, you have
super metal.
T-shirt idea. You have the offended zombie from the NTSC PAL cover, plus all roads lead to hell. Just put that together on a T-shirt. I mean, yeah, I didn't realize just exactly how upset he looks, but it's like he's saying, this affects my rights.
Yeah, because he's grabbing the arm like, no, stop, please. I'm going to get shot.
You will hear from my lawyer.
Oh, man. Right, well, it's time. Let's try and be as mature about this as we possibly can as we move on to Resident Evil 6.
No.
Japan
I love Toys R Us.
You don't get to take this away from me.
Japan has just every character, every man and woman on Earth on the front cover, just standing randomly all about the place, looking sort of like, I don't know, they all look sort of waiting for a bus, to be honest. And then, the NTSC and PAL version.
It looks like every single one of them has the badass face on, like, I'm the star of this game.
Yeah.
And then the next guy's like, I'm the star of this game. And then the next guy's like, I'm the star of this game.
And then they look like I'm the star of this.
They look like the cast for a cancelled CSI spin-off.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, all those characters, not a single crow.
Not one crow.
Bin it.
How far?
So the NTSC and PAL version, of course, at least it remains consistent. Again, from Remake and 0, 4, 5, and 6. It's just the title. I love that. I love the idea of the sort of like webbing and all this. It's just a real shame that logo is absolutely terrible.
Well, it's just a dude blowing a giraffe.
There we go.
How could they not see it?
Yeah. The internet blew
so
up,
weird.
didn't it? It just...
So you take that logo out and just put a standard 6 in the same font as Resident Evil. That is a great cover.
Yeah.
I like it.
We took 500 takes, and this was the best one. How do we pronounce this game, by the way?
The 6. It's like the rest of it's kind of more organic looking, but then the top, they really just made it like a weird shape. If they had curved it round more and not had it look like a giraffe, it would have been fine.
Yeah, it's so...
a very relaxed giraffe, by the way. It's kind of like...
Oh, well, you would
climbing back. He's like, oh, yeah.
Oh, God. It's just a weird... To be honest, it's just a weird shape for a 6. Like, we're going to separate it in this part and this part. So it just kind of... Taking away all of that extra stuff, it does just look like two random shapes when you look at it for long enough, just like put together.
See, I always thought it was like a spider from the front. I always thought it was like a spider from the front for the actual, like, should we say, the giraffe, and then the quote-unquote weird job delivery system was like someone being cocooned by a spider. I always thought it was like that's what they were going for because the whole webbing and stuff.
I can't see it any other way than the aforementioned giraffe. It just is burned into my brain at this point.
Yeah, I think we should just move on. To be honest, neither cover wins. They're both terrible.
They were going to put him in the game. No. Giraffe was an Xbox exclusive.
Ain't no crow.
But before we move on, how do we pronounce this one? Is this 6?
Oh.
Resident Evil. Is Resident Evil a subtitle?
Yeah, because
because
with 5, the 5 was intermingled, whereas the 6 is clearly above. So this goes back to the convention of number then name. So this is 6 Resident Evil.
So, continuing, more again, Leon looking stern with a gun. We have Damnation, the second CGI film, more characters. Ada standing on... I don't know, like she's like a giant in the middle of a city street. The NTSC and PAL version, again, is the same sort of thing. Giant Ada walking through a damaged street, and the other two characters just kind of looking stern and having guns. Liquor thrown up at Tomps. Yeah, it's kind of similar to Degeneration in the fact that, hey, there's some monsters and some characters, and it's crazy. Yeah.
Finally, the modern day reboot of Attack on Titan no one wanted. It falls in the same trap as Degeneration for me.
Yeah.
It just look fan novelly. And I mean, I know he's not Chris, but you could be fooled into thinking that's Chris Redfield as Leon's back, buddy with the AK.
Yeah.
And then the prototype or early cover just looks, that looks like a bootleg thing you find in Poundland.
That was...
Yes.
I had to stifle laughter as I was scrolling down and talking about it because I saw it and I seen artwork not final and I was like, damn right.
Like, I didn't go out of my way to look for any like beta artwork or anything. I just stumbled across this and I had to include it just because of how ridiculous it is. And it's just
for the listeners, it's like Darth Vader's like personal chamber in Empire Strikes Back, and then the liquor from the first Resident Evil live action film have just been slapped onto a cover, and then there's just the title.
Yeah, this is basically it is an amalgamation of literally 2 source images, one of which is looks like a hand painted futuristic kind of cyberpunk sort of scene. That's somewhat the background.
Yes, right.
Yeah. There you go. And then the foreground is what I can only describe as a 120p version of an ultra lossy compressed liquor that is itself retching its disgust at its own existence.
Definitely, Jordan, you're 100% right. And they've even got, I hate when this happens, but like when they merge those images together, you have like the weird like glow from around the liquor. If you look in. He has that kind of like white
They've
glow.
added out a glow.
Yeah. It's just Ah,
I think that's meant to be the light from the background image.
yeah, but it doesn't
That's
work.
them trying to make it like kind of bounce off. Oh, that's so bad.
It looks to
Nice.
me like someone got some concept art for a cancelled like Alien video game, and their child was just like clipping pictures out of a magazine for fun, and it just fell on it, and they were like, "Yeah, that'll do."
There was an alien in that spot, and they were like, "Let's just cover that with a looker. We're good to go."
I can believe that, to be honest.
I'm confident in saying that this is the Damnation is the worst series of box arts I have seen so far.
And I'm confident to say that Damnation is the T-shirt I would wear.
What the early?
Yeah, because it just, I mean,
Only
too
real
much of a
fans get
conversation
this.
starter there.
Yeah.
All roads lead to artwork, not final.
I appreciate looking at that and then looking at the final version and kind of feeling like they are on level pegging, but one is because it's so bad it's actually entertaining.
To just take away from that particular cover and to go to the which version is it? The NTSC and PAL version. It just feels like a real missed opportunity, this cover, because it just seems like there's loads of space which is just not being used properly. I think the render of Ada is just awful. She's just standing there. She's a very interesting character, and they've made her look boring.
Look at her arms. Like nobody has that pose ever. Nobody stands in that. Like nobody crosses their arms like that. It's just weird.
She looks like she wasn't meant to be in the photo. Like when people take photos at Disneyland and stuff, and somebody gets caught and they don't really know what to do. They just try and move out of frame. That's what she looks like. She thought she was a relatively good distance away from the camera. She thought she was like behind Leon, and she's like, "Oh no, they've caught me in it." I don't know what's really going on here. That's supposed to be a liquor at the top of the cover, I guess, but it doesn't really look like a liquor there. From that perspective, it looks like a Doom enemy or something like that.
A Hell Knight snuck through.
Yeah.
Which probably would have made the cover more interesting. But yeah, the background scene is nothing sort of interesting. It's just kind of like it's a city in ruins, but we've seen that plenty of times and better. So yeah, it's just very uninspired. I don't know what's going on with Leon.
Yeah, the longer I look at it, the lighting is doing my nutting because there's obviously fire behind them and it doesn't work.
There's been an explosion of fonts and they have not heeded the warning. I mean, Ada's got the reflection of the fire at the top of her head. So they're suggesting that the fire is very close to her head.
That's true.
It's so weird. I never even thought about that.
Of the fire is even more prominent on Leon's hair, so somehow it's closer to him.
If we actually look at this from like a top-down perspective, that fire, despite only being so tall, is actually about 50 meters wide. It's actually a sheet of fire.
I love how in depth we're getting on that.
Once again, an original CG motion picture.
And once again,
I hate to do this to you guys. I think I have to shoot.
No, you're not allowed.
But I want to leave you with my favorite. I'm going to tell you what my favorite is when you come to discuss it, because I'm going to be interested to listen. But my very favorite Resident Evil cover ever is the NTSC and PAL version of Resident Evil 7 with the manor house, but then the child just completely in black. I love that. So I'll be interested on your thoughts. I've had a wonderful time talking to you, and I'll speak to you all again soon.
Bye.
Bye, Adam.
Bye. Sorry.
See you later.
Fun talking to you.
You too.
Well, let's move on then. Biohazard Revelations 2, like the first Revelations game, consistent across all regions, and like the first game, back to the classic eyeball. This one, now that I'm looking at it, extremely bloodshot. Just something really very wrong with that person. And I guess they're looking through like a jail cell, because that's where the game starts. That would be my assumption.
Yeah, that must be it then.
It's fine. I kind of, the coloration on like seeing some more of like the face and the head almost, but not really seeing anything. Like the coloration and the detail there is nice. but it's a little bit stock, I guess.
Yeah, by the numbers. That's what I was going to say. It's great that because obviously Resident Evil Revelations 2, the whole prison cell thing, and there's that barbed wire embedded in the face, which is the enemies of the game, and that obviously fits in the aesthetic. But it literally feels like the most. They've obviously worked hard on it, but it's by the numbers, and I can appreciate it's got a slightly abnormal color scheme and it's rusty, but the first one that has a solid meh.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It's hard to come up with anything more than meh.
I'm very shocked that this is for all regions as well. I didn't realize that it was literally everywhere. For such a kind of like a tepid kind of cover to get that kind of widespread.
Yeah.
I think that artwork not final probably has a bit more merit to be shared worldwide than Biohazard Revelations 2. Again, very Condemned 2. Although I do need to point out the subtitle for Condemned 2 is Bloodshot.
Oh.
And ironically, on the original Condemned 2 cover, the eye is not bloodshot. Anyway, that just goes to show how little I have to say about this particular cover. It's just, yeah.
It's a shame. It's a fun game as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good thing that people knew about the Revelation series prior to this, and there was interest, and people could go sort of check this out, because the cover alone would not sell it.
Not to dwell on it too much, but maybe it's because there is less of a focus on physical release here. Obviously, this game was the episodic one, and they're releasing chapters over however long it was. So maybe that's cause for less focus on what the cover art is. But I don't feel like that should be true, though, because obviously you still have to go on, your console store, and it has to grab your attention. So I still think it's important. So I don't know.
It's also the physical release cover as well, isn't it? That's not just the digital cover.
Yeah, that is the physical release, yeah.
It is fascinating that we don't have like a Japanese variant that has a render of Claire, at least. We love the renders, so yeah.
Well, we do have another piece of cover art from Japan without any character renders. Biohazard 7, Resident Evil. This one's a weird one. It's just a mishmash of stuff. I never really could tell what any of it is beyond, obviously, there's a face there, and you can sort of see the Baker House just propped above that because it's sort of like a horizon. But there's just loads of stuff around the top. It's really interesting, and of course, needs to be said how great the logo for both this and Resident Evil 7 are, that they have the number highlighted in them in orange. The part of the Z in Biohazard is a 7, and the V, I, and L make up the Roman numerals of 7. Just, forever will be a clever little thing. How do we feel about these?
They've been waiting years to do that.
I'm sure they've been sitting on that one.
It's a great cover, the Japanese cover. It's got a lot of different details. I mean, from what I can see, on either side of the face, you've got one of them looks like a wheel, which could be from either a bicycle or a wheelchair. I presume maybe a wheelchair, perhaps. And there is also what appears to be a fetus.
I can't see that one.
Just to the right-hand side of the face.
Oh,
the silhouette of a fetus.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things, and it looks like there's some kind of like knives and hooks, and there's a rake and different kind of weapons and stuff like that. It looks like there's possible kind of like slightly mangled hand on the right hand side. I don't know. It's kind of like interpreting clouds. There's certain things that you may or may not see.
Yeah, it does make me think.
Although I've never looked up to a cloud and said, "Oh, that looks like a wheel," and that looks like a fetus.
There is a hint of Rorschach painting about this, isn't there? Really?
Yeah. You know what? Like, I think my mind must be messing with me, because I didn't actually know that this was a Resident Evil cover. I was certain in my head, for some reason, I don't know why, I thought this, whenever I've seen the image, had something to do with the evil within. Honestly, don't know why. That crossed my mind. Perhaps I just thought that it sounds insulting. I thought it was maybe a bit too cerebral for a typical kind of Resident Evil cover.
Sure, I understand that. No, I understand what you mean.
But yeah. What am I saying? We just came from a cover which was just an eye. So no, it's very clever and it's very nice. strangely enough, it doesn't feel like a debut cover. It feels like something that maybe is done as a special edition or even as a reverse sleeve. It feels almost too ambitious of a cover to do your first time when you're putting out a new game. But I suppose when you're getting to the 7th Resident Evil, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna sell.
They still tried very hard, though.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not to tip my hat too soon, but literally every one of these Resident Evil 7 covers is getting a T-shirt. They're all
they're all great.
I'd say they're all pretty good in their own unique, special ways.
Yeah, I'll be honest. A lot of these covers I've never seen before. I mean, obviously, I've seen the typical NTSC and PAL version, but the gold editions, never seen them. And yeah, they're very, very compelling.
Yeah, the gold edition for Japan is really cool because it takes that image and then really it does something different with it by pulling up that center part there, adding more feature to the face. You see more of the face, you see tears, you see what looks like blood running out of the mouth. You can see a pained expression. I love that it's called Biohazard 7, or however we pronounce that. Biohazard, I don't know. Resident Evil Gold Edition, grotesque version. That's fantastic, isn't it?
I was going to ask about that. Do you know anything about that, Si?
There'll be censorship, won't it, to the violence and stuff?
They in the original Japanese version, certain parts were censored. One that immediately comes to mind is the officer in the garage who gets his head split in half with the shovel. He just falls over. His head doesn't get cut in half or anything in the original. So this gold edition re-release has that put back into it. The part where you put your arm inside of a body, I think, was also censored as well. So it's kind of like a director's cut, and being gold edition, it also has all the DLC as well.
I think grotesque version should be added to every game. Animal Crossing Amiibo Festival.
Oh God! Jack Baker turns up with a chainsaw that's made out of rake.
Exactly.
I kind of appreciate the parallel between the gold edition across the board, because obviously you've got underneath the house is Mia in the Japanese version. Then you've got the haunting, spooky, slightly over the top and almost horror movie poster-esque Evelyn in the gold version. Like I said, I like all of these. I can appreciate them. They all have a different feel. Like gold in the PAL territories is very much a horror movie, and then you've got gold in Japan, which almost feels like a grindhouse film.
Yeah, it's true,
And then you've got the original PAL, Western release of 7, which just looks phenomenal, almost looks like a Silent Hill cover kind of feel to it for me. And then the Japanese version's like a Nightmare Dreamcatcher on a panel of wood, and it's very Blair Witchy, found footagey. They all have really good, strong designs. I'm surprised the only parallel really is the structure is somewhere and there's either something above it or beneath it, except for the Western one, which is basically here's a spooky house and here's a spooky girl.
Here's a spooky house and here's a spooky girl.
I know, but it literally looks like just that could be Silent Hill PT, the thing, and that will be the cover. But instead, it's Resi 7, and it's perfectly fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, if someone handed me the game and I'd never played anything in the franchise before, they went, "Here's a spooky house, here's a spooky girl," I'd be like, "Okay, you've told me everything I need to know. Let's do it." Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a spooky house. Here's a spooky girl. What am I? Fatal Frame? Siren?
None of these follow the paradigms of the earlier Resident Evil covers.
No, it
exactly.
is and I think that's good because it was intended as a sharp left turn, wasn't it? It was
absolutely.
Meant to be, here's something different.
I think they just gave themselves a free pass. They just said, "Look, we're kind of starting over in so many ways. Let's go for it. Let's have a variety to the styles." I think they're very tasteful, and also Steve, you pointed out something I didn't realize, but I think you bang on about it being a dream catcher. It looks very Dreamcatcher like, and I think that's a really good idea. Just merging all of these kind of images together in that kind of fashion is great. Really good round of covers to go from Damnation to Revelations 2 one cover, and then go to this. it's just a stark contrast.
You know where the art team's budget went. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I also really like, this is particularly nerdy, I really love the font that they've got for the new logo here. They've done away with previous typefaces. It's almost like a throwback to the sort of Impact font that they were using before, but it's now got all this detail in it. Something old and something new and that. And obviously they use that same font again with Remake 2, so that seems to be sort of like the crowning of a new era. We're going to be using this moving forward, and I really like that cracked classic font. Yeah, just a fan overall. Yeah, it's, like you say, a fantastic round of covers. Right, moving on to the final CGI movie. Here we go again. Biohazard Vendetta. Just, yeah, pretty boring. There's Leon, there's Chris. Done. Apparently, that's enough to sell it.
They look like they're related in the Japanese cover.
They
The Japanese cover is basically Yakuza Kiwami, the Western remake.
Oh,
I really don't like it at all.
I mean, I can appreciate that the Western version, because at least it's got a monster and it's got Rebecca. But the Japanese one's inexcusably it's garbage. It's just, here's Leon, here's Chris, here's a bit of lens flare in a grey city. That could be anything.
Mm-hmm. I get that they're trying to make it like kind of like, oh wow, you're getting like Leon and Chris in a story together at last, but there's just nothing really to it. There's some helicopters in the back. There's one, maybe two buildings on fire. That's all your hint as far as they could be working at the same investment bank as rivals. That's as much information as you're kind of getting from this. This does not scream zombie movie in any particular fashion. It doesn't even whisper zombie movie.
A CGI Wolf of Wall Street. That's what this is.
Yeah.
They haven't got fancy smancy haircuts as well.
It would have been a better movie if it was just Chris and Leon in Wall Street.
I mean, to be fair, you would say at least the NTSC and PAL version has this. Let's be honest, that's also horrible. I'm
not excusing it.
I know.
Terrible.
They're just green caps from the film or something. It looks like just spliced together. You got the tyrant thing at the top with his claw over the sort of band through the middle there.
At least you can tell it's a Resident Evil thing. That's what I'm saying, because
I know.
But the other one's just
if we're going to get the shovel in,
just yeah.
If we're going to get the shovel in,
buried the other two.
The tyrant from that cover looks like he's part of like Davy Jones's crew in Pirates of the Caribbean. He looks like he's just part crustacean.
I also, the sort of fingers on the title there almost looks like he's trying to hold that bar down, because if he doesn't, it's going to just like keep going up and just covering up. It's just like, hey, here's the characters. That's all you need to know.
They couldn't afford to suspend it. They had to pay one of them.
Yes, holding onto it.
Yeah. Also, it kind of looks like he's looming over them like the genie in so many Aladdin posters.
No, that's an Aladdin remake. It'd be interesting. Iron with claws and a hunger for flesh.
Oh, dear.
It's just so clean. Like even all of the screenshots down at the bottom, you wouldn't think if they didn't show the monster, and you wouldn't think that it had anything to do with zombies. And they just all look like test renders. They just look like kind of almost like a tech demo that you might have seen from the early PS3 days when they're like showing off the power of the PS3, and all it was a character to a background, but nothing particularly contextual about it.
Yeah, no one's asking for a remake of Resident Evil Vendetta, are they? It actually kind of... the back of video game cases these days have a kind of almost a uniform design. It reminds me of that now, the more I look at it, where it's like, here's so many screenshots, text band in the middle, and that's it.
That's true.
To be honest, the Vendetta series has definitely taken a turn for the worse. It had Die Hard, then Def Jam, now Resident Evil.
Falling on hard times.
Just about its revelations.
Yeah, that's true, Okay, and then the last one, the most up-to-date cover, Resident Evil 2 2019. Should also be pointed out as an aside, on the Discord server we ask our members something new every week, And this week's poll: what is your favourite modern Resident Evil game from the numbered titles, Remake 2 and the Revelations game? And this game came out on top, so that's pretty cool. So still in the hearts and minds of many. But as I said before, you've got that new logo, which looks fantastic through the middle there, and kind of contrast to what we were saying before about characters surrounded by monsters but not looking particularly concerned. In this, I feel like they actually do look like they're surrounded, even if you can't see the full circle of enemies around them.
Absolutely. They're focused on something. They're not just looking off. They're not smug. They've got their weapons ready. And they're surrounded and they've got their backs to each other. It makes perfect sense.
Isn't this like a throwback to the... isn't there some CG artwork that's like very similar with the classic characters? And isn't this meant to be a throwback to that with the way they're posed? Am I going crazy?
It's kind of similar, yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, perhaps it is, yeah.
It's
yes, the N64 Japanese cover is similar to that in a fashion. Although Claire's just standing in the original render. She's just sort of standing with her gun. And they're not surrounded by zombies at all.
I love how nervous they look. They're not badass at all in this, as opposed to every other CGI render except for Vendetta, where they stare at you. They're actually looking like they're worried. They're in over their head. I'd say it's a step down from 7, but it's still worthy of being a T-shirt. I kind of don't like the city skyline at the bottom, though. For what it's worth, I feel like the cover would have been better if it had just been from Resident Evil's title up, with it all being like this dark blue, and it's very. I mean, you got the RPD in the background, or at least I think it's the RPD, unless it's a new structure. I don't think.
Yes, it is.
And you also got the rain, which is a big deal for the remake, in that it's always raining, and that wasn't in the original. I know that sounds like not a model, but it's nice. It's nice. I can appreciate it, and the fact that for once the heroes are not badasses; they're in over their head, and the zombies actually look like they are going to rip them to bits.
Yes,
it is an odd choice to have the cityscape underneath them, but it doesn't not work. It adds some different color variation going on there. So it's fine.
Oh no, I'm just saying that's personal preference. I
agree. Yeah.
I presume that this is going to get a re-release at some point. I don't think there's ever been a Resident Evil game that hasn't had some form of re-release. So I fully expect them to do a different kind of cover, but I don't know what they would do with the cover, whether or not they would, focus on increasing the amount of characters on screen on the cover, or whether or not they would maybe focus on the monsters themselves.
I should totally be a new take on the European Resi 2 cover, just like a white scary face.
See, now there was an original sort of piece of artwork, right? I think it was one of the early banner images, which was just from the nose down of a zombie.
Yes,
do you recall this?
Yeah,
and it's just a very kind of grisly image of somebody who clearly has been turned into a zombie with a rotting mouth.
Smiling zombie, isn't it? The one that you see in the petrol station.
It is,
the gas station. Yeah. I think that's like one of the sleeve covers for the game. I could be wrong.
Right. Yeah. Because I know obviously there was like this is the standard cover, the general cover. I know they did some different optional ones for like deluxe edition and stuff.
Yeah, there's like what do they call them? The ones where you move it in your hand and it changes. Is it lenticular?
Oh, I think it is. Yes, lenticular.
With Leon and Claire sort of standing in the rain and that sort of thing. But obviously this is the main cover, really.
They're also very good renders. Both of
yeah.
those. The one particular with Leon looking down is really nice. I think it. Yeah, they get the drama just right in these images. They really kind of modernize Resident Evil 2 in a authentic way, and also they reset the scale as far as like how we perceive drama in these games. So it's not like Resident Evil 6, where it's meant to be all sort of Michael Bay explosions and a big ensemble cast. It's like, here are your two characters, and they can die. Like, you are in danger from minute one, and I like that. I like that that's emphasized on the cover.
Yeah.
It's funny, you mentioned 6, and I really just think, that did look like a really bad album cover.
I guess it's kind of cool that since we've gone through all of these, and we have spent a lot of time really just sort of digging them and just not digging in a nice way, digging them a hole. But it's nice that the last few that we've spoken about, in terms of game releases at least, have been much more of a positive slant. So it does look, like they're figuring it back out again in terms of box art. Because I feel like we were very praise heavy of some of the earlier stuff. And this one's been less so, but it's nice to end on some high notes there with 7 and 2 both being pretty strong overall.
Yeah, shows that there's still like the creativity there, that they want to kind of make something new and engaging without necessarily having to kind of keep following the tropes. Like, I'll be honest, I think Revelations kind of played out the whole eye aspect to a degree that I probably would be happy not seeing an eye on a Resident Evil cover for a while. Don't mean eyes in general. The characters can still have eyes, but just like a single solitary eye.
I think if there's a Revelations 3 ever going to happen, you probably have to, for consistency's sake. But it'd be nice to see them do something different with it, perhaps, if they can.
I mean, the whole nature of Revelations is kind of throwbacky, isn't it? So,
but yeah, no, I definitely see your point.
I think the one thing I can say I have to dissect in the whole lot, the CG movies, their covers, they need a lot. They every one of them was a clunker, really, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're all bad. Yeah.
Considering those are the ones that really need to kind of try hard to be selling themselves, because they're movies. You can watch them in 90 minutes. It's quite straightforward, but the covers are never really sort of engaging. It's just kind of, they should have focused more on the actual aspect of the enemies themselves. Just make it a bit more engaging as a threat, not just, oh look, there's Leon again, and doesn't he scowl?
Right. Okay. Well, that seems to conclude it thus far. I don't think we'll have an episode 3 in us. It'll take another 15 years until we get to that point. So, thanks for listening to Box Art Study Part 2, and now we'll move on to our bite-sized discussion to close out the show. So let's briefly have a bite-sized discussion segment for this episode. With E3 2019 just around the corner as of the time of recording, do we think that Resident Evil will have a presence at the event? And if so, what do we think it's going to be? Jordan, let's start with you.
I think it would be smart for Capcom to show something or announce something Resident Evil. I know they've had they've had the re-releases on the Switch lately, so it's not like they're not marketing things, but I think Resident Evil's as a brand, as a series, is in a really good place right now, and it would be a great time to capitalize on that. I don't know exactly what they would possibly release. I don't know if they would do any further support for Resident Evil 2, or whether now's the time to move on to the next chapter. More likely that, and I would be surprised if there's not, something. Just a teaser, perhaps. Just some kind of announcement that something is on the way in a more official manner. But I honestly, I don't know about the direction. It would be cool if we were able to see something more to do with sort of a follow-up to 7. But I really don't know what direction they're going to go, because they've got so many opportunities ahead of them now, I would say. So it's all up in the air. What do you guys think?
Well, history kind of suggests like almost a pattern now. In between big releases of Resident Evil, there's normally like a 4-year interval before we hear anything, traditionally. Or at least that's the way it feels to me. But we had, 2016 Resident Evil 7 was announced, and then we had 2017 RE7. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
And then obviously last E3 we had RE2. Both have been met with massive critical aplomb. Obviously, we've had rumors before, we've covered in the news and stuff, that Resident Evil 3 is allegedly in development. I'm pretty sure the Resident Evil fan sites and things that are a little bit more, shall we say, eager for Resident Evil 3 have been baying as if it is in development. It's like clearly 80% finished. Take that as a pinch of salt, whatever. If that is true, we may see something regarding Resident Evil 3 at E3. I don't see Resident Evil 8. I don't see it yet. If they're taking the time that they normally do, I don't see Resident Evil 8 appearing anytime soon. At least that's my take.
That's fair, I think. It's an interesting one because, again, if you're talking about sort of the rumours and talk and stuff, is that perhaps they're going to try and release a game every year, apparently, which, I guess it's possible. So whatever,
doesn't have to be a mainline title, though, does it? I mean,
no, exactly. So if they do announce something, you'll probably get it sometime next year, whatever it is. But it might not be Remake 3. I think I agree. I don't think Resident Evil 8 is coming particularly soon, especially... It'll be interesting to see. It would be interesting to know how far in development they were before Remake 2 kind of came out and the reaction to that, because that might have also affected the development of that game. You don't really know, but yeah, I believe we'll see something, whether it's a tease for Remake 3 or another game, perhaps. I think it'll be very short and basic, and basically just an announcement and a release year. But probably very little.
Dino Crisis, isn't there?
Yeah, I
pinch
don't.
Of salt there.
Yeah, I would be very shocked. That's very cult. I don't think that. I think they know full well that if they did that, it's not going to go down, quite the same. It's not as well known.
A little bit pipe dreamy.
Yeah, so who knows? But if you're looking for more than just a tease, perhaps and it's really just popped into my head since we were talking about Remake 2, perhaps it will be for some more Remake 2 content and a gold edition. If they do a gold edition, and there isn't really much to add to a gold edition, perhaps they'll announce some extra content that's going to be exclusively part of a re-release or something, or who knows, maybe that's what it is, and that's how they're going to hold people over for now, is a re-release of that game.
I can't help if there is an E3 presence, a new Resident Evil presence. There's at least some kind of really swish stand or booth, because it's always fun seeing the people go to E3 and then they've got like either a mock of the RPD or the Baker House and stuff like that. So maybe it's just the inner appeal of escape rooms themed on Resident Evil, but I would love to see stuff like that at the very least. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I think we were all, well, let's put it this way, we'll find out soon enough. And our next episode isn't too far away, so of course we'll be talking about that in the next edition of the news, whatever it is, so we'll see how right or wrong we are. Nothing else remains for me but to thank our contributors. If you'd like to be part of the show, then please look into auditioning for our file readings. One way to get in touch is email us at faspraypod@gmail.com. But of course, the best course of action is to join our Discord server, where you can also ask questions for Bitesize Discussion, discuss Resident Evil with us and other fans, and listen to the podcast live as it's being recorded. The link to the server is in the description of this podcast and also on all of our social media profiles. You can follow us on Twitter at faspraypod, on Instagram at faspraypod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/faspraypod. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Stitcher, Spotify, and iTunes. And if you enjoyed the show, then please do leave us an iTunes review if you can. It helps spread the word. Our next episode, we're going to take a slight sidestep away from Resident Evil and talk about something related, but let's leave it there. I'm sure people will figure out what exactly that means, but let's just leave it hanging in the air. Thank you to the panel. You can follow us all individually. I'm at Psyniac_123. Steve is at Firebutton Games. Jordan is at SerialBox64. And you can find Adam on Facebook at facebook.com/Mr. Lucky Paint. And finally, thank you for listening and have a good week.
I'm sorry for springing the quote-unquote T-shirt scale on you, but I just couldn't resist.
I love it.
T-shirt scale was fire. I liked it.
That's the gimmick of the episode, I think. So
yeah. Yeah, when there's a director's cut of Box Art episode 1, I'll bring it up then.
I so want to make artwork not final memes now. I so want to just take a game and then I will take a really nice hand painted background and then a terrible render, and there you go. It's one of the easiest memes, really.
I think that's, to be honest, I think you start tweeting those out, you might end up with a subreddit on your hands there.
Yes, artwork not final.
Let's do it.